What's going on, YouTube? We're back again today with our Week 5 Fantasy Football wide receiver rankings. Before we get into the video, please do leave a like, comment, subscribe, especially if this video helped you out. Sticking in the PPR format, I have Cooper Kupp number 1 against the Cowboys, number 1 ranked wide receiver on the year, 26.5 points a game, and the Cowboys allowed 30.5 points to wide receivers. It's not a bad matchup for wide receivers against Dallas. However, the Rams have been struggling on offense, and Stafford has really been struggling. I'm not sure how he's going to hold up against the Dallas defensive line. Micah Parsons looking crazy good this year. The front line in general is just looking crazy. And it could potentially be a bad matchup for Cooper Kupp if Stafford really can't get going. But Cooper Kupp is Cooper Kupp, so I'm pretty sure Stafford is going to find him no matter what the case is. Stephon Diggs at number 2 against the Steelers, number 2 ranked wide receiver on the year, almost 24 points a game, and the Steelers allow 40.7 points to wide receivers. It's a great matchup for Diggs. However, the one thing is I do expect Buffalo to go up big early, which really may limit the pass attempts that Josh Allen does throw, kind of capping Stephon Diggs' fantasy night. Otherwise, I think Stephon Diggs is in for a huge night. Justin Jefferson at number 3 against the Bears, 4th ranked wide receiver on the year, 21.5 fantasy points a game almost, while the Bears allowed 22. Just like the Buffalo and Steelers game, I think this game will end up being a blowout. Chicago's offense is just atrocious, and many could probably get off to an early lead, really leaning on the run game to close it out. Davante Adams at number 4 against the Kansas City Chiefs. I really like this game. I remember a couple years ago there was a Raiders-Chiefs game that was just ridiculous for fantasy owners, and I don't see why it can't be again this time around. Davante Adams, the 8th ranked wide receiver on the year, averages about 18.5 fantasy points a game, while the Chiefs give up 40 points to wide receivers. So this is a really fantasy-friendly game for Davante Adams. Carr has shown that he can force feed the ball to Davante, so really good game for Davante. I really expect him to blow up this week. Amon-Ra St. Brown at number 5 against the Patriots, 7th ranked running back on the year. However, averages just about 24.5 points a game, which put him number 2 average-wise. But he did miss last week, may miss this week as well, and has the bye next week. So obviously, if St. Brown doesn't play, he's gonna be off the top 50. But for now, I have him here just because if he does play, he will be a top option, especially against New England, who allowed 32 points to wide receivers. And St. Brown has shown that he will be the guy on that offense. Him and DeAndre Swift, who also might not play. At number 6, we have Tyreek Hill against the Jets, 3rd ranked wide receiver on the year, almost 23 fantasy points a game, and the Jets give up about 33.5 points to wide receivers. So this matchup is a little interesting. I do think Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, who I have at number 10, can feast. Waddle being the 5th ranked wide receiver on the year, 20 points a game. I believe they both are in line for a good matchup. However, Bridgewater, it is going to be the starting QB, and he may not throw the ball deep, take those shots like Tua did so far in the year. I think it really benefits Jalen Waddle more than it does benefit Tyreek. But being the best receiver on the team, I think it's not too far out of the realm for Bridgewater to force feed Tyreek as well. Tyreek and Jalen Waddle as well. CeeDee Lamb at number 7 against the Rams, 13th ranked wide receiver on the year, 16.1 fantasy points a game, and the Rams give up a whopping 48 points to wide receivers. Huge matchup for CeeDee Lamb. Obviously, he's shown so far in the week that him and Cooper Rush have this connection, and it's really been going well. I think in Cooper Rush's 4 starts or 3 starts, whatever it is. Yeah, 3 starts this season, CeeDee Lamb is averaging like nearly 20 points in PPR leagues. Dak Prescott, I think, is missing this week and returning next week. Another player, I don't think CeeDee Lamb will get affected by Dak returning. Initially, we all drafted CeeDee Lamb in the 2nd round because of Dak, so CeeDee Lamb is a must-play throughout, no matter who's his QB. Jamar Chase at number 8 against the Ravens, 12th ranked wide receiver on the year, 16.1 fantasy points a game, while the Ravens give up a huge 49.7 points to wide receivers. I think this game is going to be a huge scoring game. Cincinnati and Baltimore, 2 really good teams. However, the past few games, Jamar Chase has really cooled off after his huge week 1. teams have shown a lot of coverage leaning toward Ja'Marr Chase, setting doubles, kind of trying to take him out of the game. And yet he's still been putting up some decent numbers. So the Ravens might do that. However, Ja'Marr Chase is just so good that it's hard to get him out of your top 10. If he wasn't playing the Ravens, maybe possibly he'd drop down below A.J. Brown and Jalen Waddle, but he's just so good that I don't see him being a non-factor. A.J. Brown at number 9 against the Cardinals, 9th ranked wide receiver on the year, almost 18 fantasy points a game, while the Cardinals give up about 30 to wide receivers. Great matchup for Philly. However, it has shown that Philly is a very run-heavy team. They do go get a lot of yardage with Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and A.J. Brown, but the touchdowns have been lacking. I think the only touchdown scored has been by Goedert, maybe one by Devontae Smith, but otherwise it's really just been their running backs really getting in the end zone and Jalen Hurts himself. So that could be a little problematic for A.J. Brown's value. However, whenever they're going through the air, the yards are going to A.J. Brown, Goedert, and Devontae Smith. Michael Pittman at number 11 against the Broncos, 36th ranked wide receiver only because he missed a game, 16.1 fantasy points a game, and 24.3 points allowed by the Broncos defense to wide receivers. A tough defensive matchup. Jonathan Taylor has been now announced out, and that's really going to affect the Colts offense, especially because they really rely heavily on Jonathan Taylor to open things up for their wide receivers. Naheem Hines is going to step up as the starting running back for the game, and it could boast well for Michael Pittman. Maybe now Matt Ryan is going to have to force feed Michael Pittman the ball, really lead him, give him a lot of targets, a lot of receptions. I could see that happening. He may find himself a little bit higher up on the ladder just because of that. But Denver offense has also been lackluster while their defense has been okay. So it's a tough matchup, I think, for Michael Pittman. However, with the news of Jonathan Taylor being out, I do think Michael Pittman can really, really show out. Deebo Samuel's number 13 here, 14th ranked wide receiver on the year against the Panthers, 16 fantasy points a game, while the Panthers give about 34 points to wide receivers. I really like Deebo Samuel. However, Jimmy Garoppolo and the 49ers have shown that they love to run the ball, and they are going to use Deebo as a running back here and there. Jeff Wilson had a pretty good game. Deebo had an amazing game last week with a huge touchdown, broke like 4 or 5 tackles. So when they do feed Deebo the ball, he really balls out. However, he hasn't been off to the greatest of starts. Last week was a step in the right direction. I can easily see him moving into the top 10 with more performances like that. At number 14, T. Higgins against the Ravens. We spoke about the Ravens allowing so many yards. T. Higgins is 15th ranked wide receiver on the year, 16 fantasy points a game in PPR leagues. This game, I just expect it to be a huge shootout, and I really expect T. Higgins and hopefully Ja'Marr Chase to go off. If they do double Ja'Marr Chase, T. Higgins is going to be the main beneficiary, him and Tyler Boyd, and Joe Mixon as well. So look for T. Higgins to have a good game as well. At number 15, we have Christian Kirk against the Texans, 10th ranked wide receiver on the year for PPR leagues, 17.8 fantasy points, and the Texans allow almost 31 fantasy points a game to wide receivers. I feel like the Jaguars had a pretty disappointing week last week in terms of fantasy, and I really think they're going to get off to a hot start against Houston. I actually have Houston. I think they might not even win a game this year. Maybe they'll sneak one in near the end of the year, but I think Houston is just the worst team in the NFL this year, and great matchup for the Jaguars. Marquise Brown at number 16 against the Eagles, 6th ranked wide receiver on the year, averages 19 points a game, and the Eagles give about 33 points to wide receivers. Marquise Brown has been dogging this year so far, especially with the absence of DeAndre Hopkins, who should be back at week 7. So 2 more weeks without Hopkins, so Marquise Brown can eat for those 2 weeks. I do think he's going to be a solid part of the offense even when DeAndre comes back, just because DeAndre will command so much attention. He's been really good in PPR formats, getting a lot of catches and receptions throughout. However, Philly is a tough defense this week. I think they're going to really make Kyler struggle, and just for that reason, I have Marquise Brown a little bit lower on the totem pole this week. At number 17, Courtland Sutton, the 11th ranked wide receiver on the year, 16.2 fantasy points a game, while the Colts give up about 25.5 points to wide receivers. Courtland Sutton is kind of running away with that wide receiver 1 rating. Previously, I had Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton pretty close. I have Jerry Jeudy at the number 33 spot this week. 45th ranked wide receiver, averages about 10.4 points. However, Courtland has just been killing it so far. He's definitely Russell Wilson's guy this year. With the absence of Javonte Williams, it does hurt the Denver offense, who already haven't looked too good. Just because if they can't establish the run game, it's going to be hard to get some passes going. So I expect a good week from Courtland Sutton, but it could flip-flop if the Colts really can't put up a fight with Jonathan Taylor being out and Denver comes off to a quick lead. Melvin Gordon just might run the time away. At number 18, Mike Williams against the Browns. Keenan Allen still might not return this week, which really boosts Mike Williams' value. If Keenan Allen was playing, he'd easily be in the top 15, just a PPR monster. But Mike Williams against the Browns, 20th ranked wide receiver on the year, about 14 points a game, while the Browns give up about 33 to wide receivers. Austin Eckler had himself a game last week, and the Chargers offense finally looked good. Mike Williams is a huge part of that as long as Keenan Allen is out. Even when Keenan Allen is there, Mike Williams is a huge factor for the offense. So hopefully this is kind of a revitalization for the Chargers. They've been playing kind of so far in the year, and I really expect things to kind of switch up. DK Metcalf at number 19 against the Saints, 21st ranked wide receiver on the year, about 14 fantasy points a game, and the Saints give about 35 points to wide receivers. The Saints are a little hobbled up on offense. I'm not sure if Jameis Winston is playing, Mike Thomas another one, Alvin Kamara another one, so they may not put up a lot of points. Really having Seattle lean on the run game if they get off to an early lead, and I do expect Seattle to win this game, so it could be problematic for DK if they go pull up a lead early. However, another problem is Saints defense is pretty good. I know fantasy wise they haven't really been showing it, but in game wise they have a pretty solid D. Godwin, another Tampa Bay receiver at number 20, 82nd ranked wide receiver because of all the missed games. However, only put up so far about 10 fantasy points a game, but the Falcons do allow 40. And again, I just expect this to be a blowout of the Falcons. I think Tom Brady's going to get going early. He hasn't been playing well up until last week, and I really think he's going to want to continue that trend and put up some numbers, really get the team going and kind of click offensively, seeing that this will be the second week where they have their entire wide receiving core. Drake London at number 21 against the Buccaneers. Tough matchup for Atlanta defensively. 23rd ranked wide receiver on the year, 14 points a game. Buccaneers allow about 33 fantasy points a game to wide receivers. Now, Atlanta has shown a lot of trust in Drake London. They really get him the ball often. Cordarrelle Patterson hit IR, so that's a big hit for the Atlanta running game. Now they're going to lean on Ty Algier and Huntley to be their running back. So it could affect the passing game if Tampa Bay really leans back and lets their defensive five just take over the run game. So it could be a big issue for Atlanta offensively this week. Brandon Cooks at number 22 against the Jaguars, 37th ranked wide receiver on the year, 12 fantasy points a game, and the Jaguars allow about 32.5 fantasy points to wide receivers. I do expect Jaguars to go up early, really forcing Houston to lean on the passing game, which only benefits Brandon Cooks in this situation. Nico Collins is also another option, I believe. He did not make the top 50 this week. However, top 75, I believe he did. Top 75, we have Nico Collins somewhere here, right here, 58. So not too far out of the top 50, but going back to Brandon Cooks, he's going to be the guy for Davis Mills. They're going to really try to get him the ball when they're down. So I expect a big week from Brandon Cooks. Deontay Johnson, 23rd ranked wide receiver, 40th on the year, 12 points a game almost, while the Bills give up 27 points to wide receivers. Really tough matchup for the Bills. However, Kenny Pickett is now their starting QB. They moved away from Trubisky, which I think will be better for most of the Pittsburgh skill players. Najee Harris has been struggling. Pickens, Deontay Johnson. Freiermuth has been pretty good so far in the year. So it's really going to be interesting to see how the rest of the Pittsburgh Steelers offense plays with Kenny Pickett. At number 24, Chris Olave against the Seahawks, 17th ranked wide receiver on the year. Just about 15 fantasy points a game, while the Seahawks allowed 31 points a game. Again, I see a lot of injuries for New Orleans this week. Mike Thomas, Alvin Kamara, and Jameis Winston, they all might not play. So that really affects Chris Olave, especially if the rest of the offense isn't there. just puts all the pressure on him. However, on the flip side, if Chris Olave is the only offensive weapon, they might have to force feed him the ball as well. At number 25, we have Curtis Samuel against the Titans, 16th ranked wide receiver on the year, just under 16 fantasy points a game, while the Titans allow about 43 points to wide receivers. Big game on the horizon for the Washington Commanders. I think Curtis Samuel, I have him above Terry McLaurin just because in PPR formats, Curtis Samuel does get a lot more of those receptions, really boosting his value. Terry McLaurin at 27, 41st ranked receiver on the year, just under 12 points a game. It's surprising that Curtis Samuel has been this good so far in the year, especially being a popular free agent pickup week 1. And he's really been showing that he can do well in the Washington offense. Jahan Dotson, the third receiver, is most likely out for the next 2 weeks. Definitely will be out this week, I think. They haven't fully announced it yet. But with Dotson being gone, that opens up a lot of red zone targets for the Washington Commanders. There's Logan Thomas, Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Antonio Gibson. So there's a lot of opportunity to go around with Jahan Dotson gone, especially in the red zone. Tyler Lockett, 26th ranked receiver this week against the Saints, 22nd ranked receiver overall, about 14 points a game, while the Saints give up about 35 to wide receivers. Good game for Tyler Lockett. I think him and DK have kind of been taking turns being the wide receiver for Seattle and Geno Smith. And Geno Smith has been playing pretty good. I do expect them to kind of go ahead early on the game, really limit the passing game and really focus on the run game, which Seattle really loves to do. And Rashad Penny has been playing pretty well, so it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibilities to lean on the run heavy early and late into the game. Amari Cooper at number 28, 24th ranked wide receiver on the year, almost 14 fantasy points a game, but the Chargers do give up about 39 points to wide receivers. I could see Amari Cooper going off this week just because the Chargers defense so far hasn't been amazing, allowing 40 points to wide receivers. However, Cleveland really lives or dies by the run, especially with their two backs, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Really hard to go away from it. And the matchup is pretty good for them this week, so Amari Cooper could be in line for a big week. Adam Thielen at number 29 against the Bears, 33rd ranked receiver on the year, about 12.5 fantasy points a game, while the Bears give up about 22 to wide receivers. Again, I do think this will be a blowout. I think the Vikings are just going to destroy the Bears, and if they go up early, they're really going to lean on Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison. Rashad Bateman at number 30 against the Bengals, 42nd on the year, about 11.5 points a game, and the Bengals give about 31 points to wide receivers. Bateman has been kind of on and off this season. Duvernay has been a little as well, but Duvernay remains like a deep threat, a return threat. Mark Andrews had a disappointing game last week, and the Ravens will probably be very upset about their loss last week. So I do think they may come out guns blazing this week. However, it's hard to rely on any receiver in Baltimore, I think, other than Mark Andrews. Just because they rely so heavy on the run. Lamar runs it so much. J.K. Dobbins is playing well so far, returning from injury. So I really am a little hesitant on starting a Ravens wide receiver. At number 31, we have Romeo Doubs against the Giants, 35th ranked wide receiver on the year, just above 12 points a game, while the Giants give up 24 to opposing wide receivers. I have Allen Lazard at number 36, 44th ranked wide receiver on the year, just almost 14 points a game. There are a lot of questions on the Giants quarterback. I know Daniel Jones is hurt. I know Tyrod Taylor is also hurt. So I'm not sure who's even going to play quarterback for the Giants, which would really limit their offense. Obviously, Saquon is being a beast this year. But I think Green Bay, again, like the Browns, 49ers, the Ravens, are just going to rely so heavy on the run and Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon that it's really hard to trust one of these wide receivers as your starting receivers. However, I would give the edge to Doubs just because of his ability, and I really think that Green Bay is really going to lean on him more as the season progresses. Gabriel Davis at number 32 against the Pittsburgh Steelers, 65th ranked wide receiver on the year, just below 9.5 fantasy points a game, while Pittsburgh allows 40. Gabe Davis has been pretty disappointing this year. He did miss a game due to injury. A lot of people expected him to break out like crazy this year, especially after his Super Bowl performance, his playoff performance as a whole, and he just hasn't been doing that as of yet. I do think he can put up big numbers, but he's much more of a compliment to Stephon Diggs. However, if there was a game for Gabe Davis to kind of have his little breakout, this would be the game against the Steelers. Jerry Jeudy at number 33 we spoke about earlier. Devontae Smith we spoke about as well, but 31st ranked wide receiver, almost 13 points a game. Again, I think Philly run-heavy team. Cardinals, I think, are a great matchup for Philly wide receivers. I just think Philly is just going to dominate Arizona on the ground. At 35, we have Juju Smith-Schuster against the Raiders, 47th ranked wide receiver on the year, almost 10 points a game, while the Raiders give up 35 points to wide receivers. It's been really hard to trust any Kansas City wide receiver, whether it's been Juju, Mecole Hardman, or Scantling. Mahomes has shown that he really is going to force feed the ball to Travis Kelce and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. However, their Kansas City players are always a boom or bust player in my opinion, especially in the wide receivers. Any given week, they could all pop off for a huge touchdown. So they're kind of like fringe flex plays, especially if you have a bye week coming up. However, I still value Juju the most out of all the Kansas City wide receivers. Garrett Wilson at number 37 against the Dolphins. 19th ranked wide receiver on the year, 14.3 points a game, and the Dolphins give up about 39 points to wide receivers. Elijah Moore I also have at number 40, 54th ranked wide receiver on the year, about 8.5 points a game, and Corey Davis at 45, 26th ranked wide receiver on the year, about 13.3 points a game. This could be a very, very good game for the wide receivers of the Jets, just because Miami might come off to an early lead, really forcing Zach Wilson to throw the ball. However, in Zach Wilson's debut, he showed that he will run the ball with Breece Hall or Michael Carter, and they've been really big part of the offense. But if they do go down big early, Zach Wilson might have to sling it to Garrett Wilson, Corey Davis, or Elijah Moore. Brandon Ayuk at number 38 against the Panthers, 48th ranked wide receiver on the year, just below 10 points a game, and the Panthers give up about 34. Just like with Deebo Samuel, I do think 49ers are going to lean heavy on the run, especially against the Panthers, and I think 49ers will try to target Deebo and Ayuk as much as they can. I just feel like they are just going to run the ball like crazy. DJ Moore at 39 against the 49ers, really, really tough matchup for the Carolina receiving core. 49ers only allowed 28.7 points to wide receivers, and DJ Moore hasn't been playing great, only averages 9 points a game, 51st ranked wide receiver. He's been struggling. Baker Mayfield's been struggling. McCaffrey finally had a good game last week, so maybe that shows of things to come as the offense gets a little bit more accustomed to Baker Mayfield. But DJ Moore has been very, very disappointing so far in the year, and this probably isn't the best game for him to turn things around. Tyler Boyd at number 41 against the Ravens, the third receiver for the Bengals. We touched on this a lot, but Boyd is 39th ranked wide receiver on the year, almost 12 points a game. It's going to be a high-scoring game, really benefits all of the wide receivers in play. George Pickens at number 42 against the Bills, really tough matchup. He's a 66th ranked wide receiver, only averages 6.9 points a game. However, with Kenny Pickett in the play now, I do think George Pickens' value gets a big boost. It's going to be interesting to see how it goes with Pickett at under center. So it's a kind of a wait and see with George Pickens. Robert Woods at number 43 against the Washington Commanders, 52nd ranked wide receiver on the year, about 9 fantasy points a game, and the Commanders allow 47 points to wide receivers. So this could be a huge game for Robert Woods, especially with Treylon Burks injured. Robert Woods being the veteran wide receiver of the group, he will get a lot of touches this game, especially if tight ends go down. I don't see them going down. I think they're going to lean heavy on Derrick Henry. But anytime that you're playing a team that gives up 48 fantasy points a game to your position, you could be in line for a good week. Darnell Mooney at number 44 against the Vikings, 81st ranked wide receiver on the year, averages 5 points a game, 34 points given up by the Vikings. I'm kind of hesitant. I'm very hesitant to start any Chicago Bears players other than Khalil Herbert and David Montgomery, if David Montgomery does come back this week. But Mooney played pretty good last week, kind of showed signs of what we were expecting of him. So maybe he's turning it around and can play pretty well. I do expect Chicago to go down early and fast against the Vikings, so maybe that bodes well for Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet in the passing game. At 46, Josh Reynolds of the Lions against the Patriots, 25th ranked wide receiver on the year, 13.3 points a game, and the Patriots allowed 32.5 points to wide receivers. If Amon-Ra St. Brown doesn't play, this is a huge week, another huge week in the making for Josh Reynolds. He's hurt himself, but he played through it last week, which kind of tells me he's going to play through it next week. DeAndre Swift is going to be out. and Jamal Williams will probably dominate the bulk of the touches throughout the game, but look for Josh Reynolds to do well if Amon-Ra St. Brown is not playing. Allen Robinson at number 47 against the Cowboys. Tough matchup for him. 73rd ranked wide receivers, 6 points a game, and the Cowboys give up 30.5 points to wide receivers. I see Allen Robinson's stock just declining every week. I think a week or two ago I had him in the 30s. Now he's fallen all the way down to the 45s. But this probably isn't the best game for A-Rob to turn it around again as well, just because the Dallas defense is so tough. Zay Jones, 48 against the Texans. I expect a huge game from Jacksonville offense this week. 43rd ranked wide receiver, 14 points a game. If he plays, I'm pretty sure he will. However, he was injured last week. But Houston gives up a lot of points to wide receivers through the air, and I think Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars are going to feast this game. Russell Gage, 49th ranked wide receiver on the week, 46th on the year, 10 points a game. Atlanta gives up 40.6 points to wide receivers. I just expect a huge game from Tom Brady and the Buccaneers against the Falcons. I just expect a huge game from Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. Really favorable matchup overall, and I really see them feasting this week. Michael Thomas at number 50 against the Seahawks. I have him down here because I'm not so sure he's going to play. If he does play, he'll easily jump into the top 25. Yeah, top 25 seems pretty reasonable. Right next to Chris Olave. He's been pretty good on the year, averaging 17 points a game. And the Seahawks do give up 31 points to wide receivers. But the New Orleans offense right now is struggling. Their skill position players are all injured. Keenan Allen at 51. Again, if he does play, he's going to be much higher ranked on the probably in the top 15, top 20 easily. Averages 10 points, and he got that in like 4 or 5 plays in the first game of the week. First game of the season, really. At number 52, Michael Gallup against the Rams. Averages 10 points. Obviously ranked very low because he only played 1 game, but the Rams allow so much that it's hard to not rank the Dallas wide receivers like Noah Brown, who I have at 54. I just feel like Michael Gallup will eventually overtake Noah Brown as the wide receiver 2. However, I feel like Noah Brown could be in line for another good week just because he's shown such a rapport with Cooper Rush. Claypool at 53, tough matchup for him. Only averages 6 points on the year. The Pittsburgh offense really hasn't been great. Hopefully Kenny Pickett can change things around. Duvernay, we spoke about earlier, really is a huge boomer bust player. Averages 13.3 points in PPR leagues though. 27th ranked wide receiver on the year. And 31.2 fantasy points allowed by opponents by the Bengals. So Duvernay could have a good week, but really is just too shaky to start until he gets more consistent targets. Mac Hollins at 57 against the Chiefs. Expect a huge game from the Raiders, but I do expect Darren Waller, Josh Jacobs, and Devontae Adams, and Renfro, if he does come back, to dominate touches. We spoke about Nico Collins. Moving on to Robbie Anderson, another tough matchup for the Carolina receivers. I don't expect the receivers really to get much work in. I think it's just going to be all McCaffrey. However, Robbie Anderson is a huge boomer bust player as well, so he might be worth a start if you're dealing with injuries. Isaiah McKenzie at number 60 against the Steelers. 34th ranked wide receiver on the year, 12.2 points a game, and the Steelers give up 41 points almost. McKenzie could be a sneaky start, but I do expect Buffalo to run away with the game, really focusing on the run late into the game. Devontae Parker at number 61 against the Lions, 57th ranked wide receiver on the year, 8.2 points, and the Lions give up 41 points to wide receivers. I also have Nelson Aguilar at 69. Averages about 10 points a game, 49th ranked wide receiver on the year. It's just tough because of the quarterback situation in New England. I think Brian Hoyer's starting, so they will likely be down in this game, and they'll likely have to throw the ball, which could help boost their values, but Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris have been playing pretty well. Joshua Palmer at 62 against the Browns, 50th ranked wide receiver on the year, about 9 points a game. I don't expect Joshua Palmer to be, if Keenan Allen plays, it's going to really limit Joshua Palmer's touches. However, if he doesn't, Joshua Palmer might find himself having a decent game. And in the same game, Donovan Peoples-Jones at 63, 6.5 points a game. Brissett really leaned on him the first week of the season and then kind of moved away from him. Jarvis Landry at 64 against the Seahawks. Again, if Michael Thomas does not play, Landry will probably jump up in the rankings a little bit. But again, Chris Olave has shown that he's most likely going to be the number 1 wide receiver, maybe even when Michael Thomas comes back. So I'm not so sure about starting a wide receiver 3 out there. Marvin Jones against Houston, another wide receiver 3, 67th ranked receiver on the year, and 7 points a game. As we get into like the later part of the rankings, a few players I just want to talk about. Richie James Jr. of the Giants against Green Bay, 62nd ranked wide receiver on the year, 7.3 points. Packers give up 30.5 points to wide receivers. Could be in line for a big game, especially if Daniel Jones or Tyrod Taylor play. Richie James is kind of their number one wide receiver right now. I know it doesn't say much being on the Giants' number one wide receiver, but anytime you're a number one wide receiver, in my mind, you're worth consideration for play or at least for a roster spot. So Richie James is someone to look out for. DJ Shark was injured last week. If he does play, will likely move up the rankings. Equanimeous St. Brown is another player to watch. I feel like Mooney hasn't been amazing, and they have targeted St. Brown a little bit more than Mooney through the week so far. So he's another player to watch. However, I still don't trust any Bears offensive skill players. Moving on to standard leagues, let's just touch on it a little bit and some of the differences. Cooper Kupp, still the number one wide receiver for me. Stephon Diggs does take a hit to 3 just because he does get so many catches that it really boosts his value in PPR leagues. Jamar Chase gets a bump here just because he doesn't rely on many catches. He gets a lot of yards after the catch or just catches a deep ball. So he gets a bump here. Deebo Samuel as well, really effective in the run game and doesn't really rely on catching the ball too many times to be a great scorer. Amon-Ra St. Brown takes a little bit of a hit here, bigger hit if he doesn't play, obviously, but he falls down just because he gets a lot of value in PPR leagues as well, even though I think he's the number one wide receiver in standard format so far on the year. Mike Evans at number 8 gets a bump here just because he also doesn't rely on many catches for his production. He's more of a touchdown, more of a guy that gets a lot of points from his touchdowns. Other wide receivers that really do well in PPR leagues like Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown, Michael Pittman, Sutton, all kind of move down. I think 1 or 2 spots here. Cortland Sutton as well. Mike Williams gets a little bit of a boost, especially if Keenan Allen doesn't play. Marquise Brown takes a little bit of a hit here as well just because of the Philly defense. And he's been really dominant in the receptions department. Chris Olave gets a big boost here just because he's also been showing that he gets a lot of yards after the catch. And if Mike Thomas doesn't play, he could even jump up higher. Christian Kirk takes a little bit of a fall here just because he's so dominant in PPR leagues with his catches. However, he's still the 6th ranked wide receiver in standard league, so he may do better than I have him projected. Terry McLaurin gets the bump over Curtis Samuel here just because McLaurin does not rely on many catches to be effective. Meanwhile, Curtis Samuel really got the bulk of his points from a lot of catches in PPR leagues. Brandon Cooks takes a hit here. Adam Thielen takes a hit. Alan Lazard I actually have above Romeo Dubes in standard leagues. Rashad Bateman I have ranked way higher just because of his verticality. George Pickens as well I have higher. Michael Gallup, another player I have higher up just because I don't see him catching the ball much, but when he does catch the ball, I do think he'll be effective. As well as Mac Hollins, who will be in a high-scoring affair against the Kansas City Chiefs, might break away for a huge touchdown. Juju I have ranked a little bit lower just because I prefer him out of the slot, getting a lot of catches in PPR leagues. Devontae Smith I think he's around the same ranking here, but he could be in line for a big game against the Cardinals. Deontay Johnson is another player that got a little bit of a buff, even though he plays the Buffalo defense, who's a tough D, but he's also another pretty good deep threat. Might not do as... And with the questions in the Pittsburgh offense, he's more of a wait and see, but obviously if you have him, you have to kind of start him at this point. Chris Godwin also takes a little bit of a hit in standard leagues, but still should be pretty productive against the Atlanta defense. Well, that's all for this video. Let me know down below your starting sit questions for wide receivers for week 5. I'm going to try to make it more of a thing where I do answer those in the comments below every week during the rankings. And again, as always, please do leave a like, comment, subscribe, especially if this video helped you out, and I'll see you next week.